I never thought my own son-in-law would lay hands on me. You expect that kind of thing from strangers. From drunks at a bar. From desperate men behind gas stations. Not from the man who stood in my living room 5 years earlier, shaking my hand, promising to take care of my little girl. But that afternoon, when his hand shoved my chest and my heel caught the edge of the attic stair, I understood something cold and permanent. Family can hurt you worse than anyone else. It was a Tuesday. Quiet. Gray sky pressing low over our little Ohio street like it was tired of watching people disappoint each other. I had driven over with a box of old photo albums. My late wife's handwriting filled those albums, careful dates, neat captions, small hearts in the corners. I thought my daughter might want them for her own children someday. I should have known better. The house was silent when I walked in. Too silent for a home with 2 adults working from home and a television that was usually humming. My daughter, Melissa, stood in the kitchen scrolling on her phone. Didn't look up when I said hello. That was the first sign. People who love you look up. Dad, we talked about calling first, she said, still staring at the screen. I did call, I told her. Went straight to voicemail. She sighed like I'd asked her for money instead of bringing her memories. From the living room, her husband, Trevor, called out, "What's he want now?" He didn't even say my name. Just he. I swallowed it. I've swallowed worse in my life. I brought the albums, I said, setting the box gently on the kitchen island. Your mother's things. Melissa finally glanced at them. No warmth. No nostalgia. Just inconvenience. Trevor stepped into the doorway then. Tall. Thick shoulders. The kind of man who liked filling space. You can put those up in the attic, he said flatly. We don't have room down here. Not thank you. Not let's look at them. Just instructions. I stood there a moment longer than I should have. I thought maybe we could look through them together. Melissa laughed. It wasn't cruel exactly. It was worse. It was dismissive. Dad, we're busy. We don't have time to sit around flipping through old stuff. Old stuff. That's what your life becomes if you outlive usefulness. Trevor grabbed the box and shoved it back toward me. Attic. Top of the pull-down stairs. Watch your step. They're steep. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Just realization. They didn't see me as a father anymore. I was clutter. The attic stairs were narrow, folding wood with metal hinges that groaned under weight. I climbed slowly. My knees haven't trusted stairs in years. Halfway up, I heard them talking below. They weren't whispering. She can't keep letting him just show up, Trevor said. I know, Melissa replied. He acts like he still owns everything. That one hurt more than the rest. I never acted like I owned anything. I just thought I still belonged. When I reached the top, I pushed the attic hatch open and set the box down among plastic storage bins and unused Christmas decorations. Dust hung in the air like old secrets. I stood there longer than necessary. Letting the quiet settle. Letting my pride shrink down small enough to carry. And then I started back down. That's when it happened. I was 2 steps from the bottom when Trevor looked up at me. His jaw was tight. Eyes hard. He'd worked himself into something while I was upstairs. Next time you come here, he said, you better call and wait for permission. I paused. Permission? You heard me. Melissa stood behind him, arms folded. Watching. Not defending. I'm your wife's father, I said carefully. I don't need permission to see my own daughter. Trevor took 1 step forward. You don't get to talk about my house like that. Your house. Funny how quickly a house forgets whose savings helped with the down payment. I helped you two get this place, I reminded him quietly. And that was the spark. His face changed. Pride. Shame. Rage. All twisted together. That doesn't mean you get to hang it over us forever. I wasn't hanging anything. I'd never once mentioned it before that moment. But truth can feel like an accusation when someone already feels small. He moved fast. One hand on my chest. A shove. Not a punch. Not dramatic. Just enough. My heel slipped on the edge of the bottom stair. Time does something strange when gravity takes hold. The ceiling tilted. The wooden steps rushed upward. My shoulder clipped metal. My head snapped back. And then I was falling. Wood hit spine. Metal caught elbow. My temple struck something sharp. By the time I reached the floor, the world was a ringing blur. Melissa's voice sounded far away. Oh my God. But she wasn't running to me. She was standing still. Trevor looked down at me like I'd spilled something on his rug. Get out of here, you stingy old man, he shouted. Stingy. After the loans. After the babysitting. After the repairs I did for free. Melissa laughed. Not loud. Just a short, nervous sound. Let him lie there and think about his behavior, she said. Think about my behavior. I tried to sit up. White-hot pain exploded through my hip and down my leg. My vision doubled. Blood trickled warm behind my ear. I can't move, I managed. Trevor snorted. You'll live. They walked back into the living room. I heard the television turn on. Volume up. Drowning me out. That's the part one remember most clearly, the sound of canned laughter from a sitcom while I lay on cold tiles staring at the underside of attic stairs. I wasn't angry yet. Just stunned. You don't expect betrayal to feel so ordinary. My hand found my pocket by instinct. Old habit. I always carry my phone in my left jacket pocket. The screen was cracked when I pulled it out. Must have happened in the fall. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I didn't call 911. No. I called someone else. Someone Trevor didn't know about. The phone rang twice. Hello? I could barely speak. It's me, I whispered. I need you to come to Melissa's house. Silence on the other end. Then the voice changed. Sharp. Alert. What happened? He pushed me, I said simply. Down the stairs. I heard a chair scrape hard against the floor wherever they were. Stay where you are, the voice said. Do not move. As if I could. The edges of my vision were going dark. I could still hear the television. Still hear them laughing. And for the first time since I'd become a father, I didn't feel like one anymore. I felt like a problem someone hoped would solve itself. The last thing I remember before blackness closed in was the sound of sirens in the distance. Not the slow kind. The urgent kind. And when the police arrived, they froze in shock. But that's for the next part. Because what they saw when they walked through that door. Well. Trevor learned something that day. Never assume the old man on the floor is powerless. Sometimes. He's the one who built the floor. I don't remember losing consciousness. Just the sound of sirens cutting through canned laughter. When the front door burst open, I heard boots on hardwood. Heavy. Urgent. Police. Is anyone hurt? Trevor came out first. Annoyed. Yeah, some old guy fell. And then one of the officers stepped into the hallway and saw me. Everything changed. His voice shifted. Sir. He knelt beside me. Not rushed. Not casual. Careful. Like he knew exactly who I was. Trevor frowned. He just slipped. He's being dramatic. The second officer entered. And froze. Not because I was bleeding. Because he recognized my face. You see, the man I called wasn't a friend. He was my younger brother, Daniel. 32 years on the force. Retired captain. And half the department still called him sir. He walked in behind them. Slow. Controlled. Coat still half-buttoned. His eyes went from me on the floor to Trevor. And I watched the blood drain from my son-in-law's face. Joe, Daniel said quietly, kneeling beside me. Who did this? Trevor tried to step in. Now wait a minute. Daniel didn't even look at him. I asked my brother a question. I swallowed. My mouth tasted like metal. He pushed me. No drama. No yelling. Just truth. Melissa finally found her voice. It was an accident. Daniel stood up slowly. You laughed, I added. Not loud. Just enough. The room went still. One of the younger officers glanced at Trevor. Then at Daniel. Trevor tried to puff himself up again. You don't even know what happened. He's always interfering. Daniel stepped closer. Not aggressive. Worse. Disappointed. You shoved a 72-year-old man down attic stairs. Trevor opened his mouth. Closed it. Daniel turned to the officers. Call for EMS. And start a report. That's when Trevor realized something. This wasn't going to disappear. Not with excuses. Not with volume. Not with intimidation. When the paramedics lifted me onto the stretcher, I looked at Melissa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Trevor tried one last time. This is a misunderstanding. Daniel finally looked him dead in the face. No, he said evenly. It's assault. And that's when Trevor started to beg. Funny how quickly pride evaporates when consequences show up in uniform. As they wheeled me out, I caught one last thing. Trevor whispering harshly to Melissa. What did he do? Who did he call? She didn't answer. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't know her father at all. Hospitals have a smell. Antiseptic and fear. I lay there under fluorescent lights while a young doctor pressed along my hip and ribs. Nothing broken, they said. Deep bruising. Concussion. Stitches behind my ear. I've had worse. Pain never bothered me much. Disrespect did. Daniel stood near the window, arms folded, watching everything. He hadn't raised his voice once. That's what made Trevor nervous. Men like Trevor understand shouting. They don't understand quiet authority. After the scans were done and the nurse stepped out, Daniel pulled a chair close to my bed. You want to press charges? He asked. No pressure. Just fact. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment. You don't picture your own daughter's husband in handcuffs. Even when he deserves it. I don't want revenge, I said slowly. I want correction. Daniel nodded once. He understood. He'll be charged, he said. That part's not up to you. Assault on an elderly person carries weight. Weight. I almost smiled. Trevor had always cared about appearances. About reputation. About his standing at work. That charge would sit on his record like a stain that never quite washed out. A knock came at the door. Melissa. She stepped in alone. No makeup. No confidence. Just nerves. Her eyes went to the bandage on my head, then quickly away. Dad. I waited. She swallowed. Trevor didn't mean. I raised a hand slightly. Don't. That stopped her. Silence filled the room. He didn't mean to. I asked calmly. Or he didn't mean to get caught. Her face flushed red. It was an accident. No, Daniel said gently from behind her. An accident is spilling coffee. This was force. Melissa turned to him. Are you really going to ruin our lives over this? There it was. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry. Just fear of consequences. I studied my daughter. The little girl who once ran into my arms after nightmares. The teenager who cried when her first boyfriend broke her heart. Somewhere along the way, she learned to protect the wrong man. I didn't ruin anything, I told her. Your husband made a choice. Her jaw tightened. He says you were threatening him. I actually laughed. It hurt my ribs. Threatening him? With what? A photo album? Daniel stood. Melissa, he said evenly, your husband shoved a 72-year-old man down attic stairs. There are medical reports. Witness statements. Body cam footage. Her eyes flicked up. Body cam? Yes, Daniel said. Every word recorded. That's when she understood something. They couldn't rewrite this. They couldn't smooth it over with excuses. The truth had already been saved. She sat down slowly in the chair by the wall. Trevor's job, she whispered. If this goes through, he could lose everything. I looked at her. And I could have lost my life. That landed. She didn't cry. She just looked small. When she finally left the room, Daniel stepped back over. You sure you don't want to push harder? He asked quietly. We could. I shook my head. No. Let the system do what it does. Because here's something most people don't understand. Consequences delivered by law sting. Consequences delivered by life last longer. Before I was discharged, a uniformed officer stepped in with paperwork. Sir, he said respectfully, we've filed the report. Your son-in-law was taken downtown for processing. I closed my eyes briefly. Not out of sorrow. Out of acceptance. Trevor had spent years thinking strength meant control. That afternoon he learned strength sometimes means restraint. As Daniel helped me into the car later, he asked one last question. You okay? I looked back at the hospital doors. I will be. Because something had shifted. I had spent years trying not to disturb their little world. Trying to be welcome. Trying to be needed. But lying on that kitchen floor taught me something simple. If someone can step over you, they already decided you're beneath them. And once that happens, kid, you stop asking for space at their table. You start building your own. Trevor made bail the next afternoon. I found out because he called me. Didn't apologize. Didn't ask how I was healing. He called to threaten me. His name lit up on my phone while I was sitting in my recliner with an ice pack on my hip. I let it ring twice before answering. You've made a huge mistake, he said immediately. No hello. No hesitation. His voice wasn't loud. It was tight. Strained. Like a man trying to hold control with slippery hands. I fell down the stairs, I replied calmly. You're pressing charges. I told the truth. You know what this does to my record, he snapped. My job is reviewing this right now. HR, legal. Everyone. There it was. Fear. But it wasn't fear of hurting me. It was fear of losing status. I warned you to stay out of my house, he continued. You don't respect boundaries. I let that hang there a second. You shoved me, I said. That was your boundary. Silence. Then the shift. If you drop this, he said slowly, we can move forward. Melissa's devastated. You're tearing her apart. Ah. Now we were using my daughter. Classic. You should have thought about Melissa before you pushed her father down the stairs. His breathing changed. Faster. You're going to regret this. I almost smiled. Trevor, I said gently, you already do. And I hung up. That evening, Daniel came by with paperwork updates. Court date set, he said, laying the envelope on my kitchen table. Temporary protective order 2. Protective order? I asked. Means he can't contact you directly. That phone call he just made? That's violation number 1. I leaned back slowly. He'd called in anger. Didn't think. Men who rely on intimidation rarely do. You want to report it? Daniel asked. I thought about it. About Trevor pacing somewhere, furious and cornered. About Melissa sitting beside him, trying to soothe his ego instead of confronting his behavior. No, I said finally. Let him sit with it. Daniel studied me. You're being generous. No, I corrected quietly. I'm being patient. Because something had clicked in me at that hospital. Trevor thought this was a fight. It wasn't. It was exposure. And exposure works slowly. Over the next week, word started to spread. Small town. Office gossip. Police report accessible. Neighbors talk. Assault on elderly man. That phrase doesn't land softly. His company placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. Melissa called twice. Left voicemails. Crying. Angry. Confused. You're ruining our lives. I never responded. Not because I didn't care. But because I finally understood something. You cannot rescue people from consequences they earned. One evening, 3 days before the preliminary hearing, there was a knock on my door. Not pounding. Knocking. I opened it. Trevor stood there. Alone. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Internally. Dark circles under his eyes. Jaw tight but no fire behind it. I know I'm not supposed to be here, he said quietly. No, I agreed. He swallowed. They're going to fire me. I waited. I've worked 10 years to build my reputation. Still waiting. This will follow me. I studied him carefully. Not looking for fear. Looking for remorse. I lost my temper, he admitted. You were pushing. I nodded slowly. You shoved a 72-year-old man downstairs. His shoulders sagged. I didn't think you'd actually press it. There it was. He hadn't expected resistance. Hadn't expected me to stand up once I could. I want you to tell them it was an accident, he said. Please. The word felt foreign in his mouth. I leaned lightly against the doorframe. Did you mean to push me? He hesitated. Too long. Yes. Honesty, at least. Then it wasn't an accident. He closed his eyes briefly. You're destroying my future. No, I said quietly. You tripped over it. For the first time, his voice cracked. I'm scared. That one was real. And I'll admit something to you, kid. I didn't enjoy seeing him scared. I enjoyed seeing him aware. There's a difference. I don't want you destroyed, I told him. I want you corrected. He looked confused. You think strength means control, I continued. It doesn't. It means restraint. You failed that test. He stared at the porch floor. What happens now? Now? I said gently. You sit in it. He left without another word. No yelling. No threats. Just a man realizing the world doesn't bend forever. As I closed the door, I felt something strange. Not triumph. Not vengeance. Balance. And that's when I understood something I wish I'd known decades earlier. The moment someone realizes you won't tolerate their disrespect, that's when they start learning who you really are. Next part, I'll tell you what happened in court. And why Melissa finally had to choose a side. Because eventually, kid, silence stops being protection. And becomes participation. Courtrooms are quieter than you expect. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just heavy. Wood benches. Fluorescent lights. The smell of paper and polish. People pretending they're not staring at each other. I walked in with Daniel at my side. Not as a captain. Just as my brother. Trevor sat at the defense table with a public defender. His suit looked expensive. His posture didn't. Melissa sat behind him. She didn't look at me when I passed. That hurt more than the fall. When Trevor finally glanced up and saw me walking steady, bruised but upright, something flickered in his face. Relief that I wasn't crippled. And disappointment that I wasn't weak. The prosecutor read the charge plainly. Assault on an elderly person. No embellishment. Just fact. Trevor's lawyer leaned in and whispered to him. He nodded once, jaw tight. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't stand dramatically. Didn't point fingers. I simply told the truth. I was bringing my daughter photo albums. We argued. He shoved me. I fell. The judge asked, "Did you feel threatened?" I paused. This part mattered. Yes, I said. Not because he was stronger. But because he believed I wouldn't do anything about it. The courtroom shifted slightly at that. Trevor's eyes lifted. For the first time, he looked directly at me. Not angry. Uncertain. His lawyer tried to frame it as a family dispute. Tempers. Stress. Miscommunication. The judge wasn't impressed. Physical force down a staircase is not miscommunication, she said evenly. Melissa finally spoke when called as a witness. Her hands were shaking. It happened fast, she said. I didn't think he'd fall that hard. Didn't think he'd fall that hard. Not I tried to stop it. Not I was scared. Just distance. The prosecutor asked quietly, "Did your husband push your father?" Melissa hesitated. Time stretched thin. Yes. Trevor closed his eyes. That one word sealed more than the charge. It sealed a fracture. After statements, the judge issued conditions. Anger management. Probation. A fine. The charge would remain on record unless completed perfectly for a set period. Not prison. But not nothing. And in small towns, assault on elderly lingers in whispers. When the hearing ended, people filed out quietly. Trevor remained seated for a long moment. Melissa stood behind him. Then she looked at me. Not with anger. Not with apology. With realization. Their life had shifted. And it wasn't because I was cruel. It was because he crossed a line he assumed didn't exist. As I stepped outside into the sunlight, Daniel asked, "You satisfied?" I thought about that carefully. "No," I said. "I'm steady." That's different. Satisfaction is about winning. Steady is about balance. Trevor learned something that day. You can dominate inside your own house. But once you step outside it, the world doesn't care how loud you are. It only cares what you did. After court, nobody called for 3 days. Not Melissa. Not Trevor. Silence has a sound when it's deliberate. It hums. On the 4th day, Melissa came over. Alone. She didn't knock hard. Just 2 light taps like she wasn't sure she was allowed. I opened the door. She looked tired. Not angry. Just worn down. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into the living room slowly, like it was unfamiliar territory. Maybe it was. She hadn't visited much since her mother passed. "I didn't think it would go that far," she said finally. "What part?" I asked gently. "The charge. The probation. His job still reviewing everything." I sat down across from her. "Did you think nothing would happen?" She didn't answer. Instead she asked, "Why didn't you just let it go?" There it was. The question people ask when accountability feels inconvenient. I looked at her carefully. "Because if I let it go," I said quietly, "he would have learned he could do it again." She swallowed. "He's not a bad person." I didn't say he was. "He just gets overwhelmed." "So do I," I replied. That hit. She stared at the coffee table for a long time. "You embarrassed him," she said softly. I almost laughed. "He shoved me down a staircase." "I know." Her voice cracked a little then. I didn't expect you to fight back." There it was. Honest. Painfully honest. She hadn't expected resistance. Maybe because I'd spent years being agreeable. Helping quietly. Not demanding respect. I leaned back slowly. "Melissa," I said, "when did you start thinking I was weak?" She flinched. "I don't think you're weak." "You laughed," I reminded her. Her eyes filled. I was nervous. "No," I said gently. "You were comfortable." That landed heavy. Comfortable with disrespect. Comfortable watching it. That realization did more than the court did. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. "I don't know how we got here." I did. But I didn't say it. Because sometimes people need to trace their own path back to the fork in the road. "Trevor's furious," she admitted. "He says you've turned everyone against him." "I didn't turn anyone," I said calmly. "I told the truth." She nodded slowly. Then she asked the question that mattered most. "What do you want now?" Not what did Trevor want. Not what did the court require. What did I want? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. "I want you to understand something," I said quietly. "Love without respect turns into permission." She held my gaze. "If you allow someone to treat me like that," I continued, "you're choosing it." She looked shaken. "I didn't push you," she whispered. "No," I agreed. "You just didn't stop him." Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Honest. When she finally stood to leave, she looked smaller somehow. "I need time," she said. "So do I answered. She paused at the door. "Are you going to cut us off?" I considered that. Revenge is easy. Distance is harder. "I'm going to step back," I said. "Until I see change. Not punishment. Boundary." She nodded. And for the first time since the fall. She looked at me like I was still her father. Not clutter. Not inconvenience. Father. After she left, I sat alone for a long time. The house was quiet again. But it felt different. Not lonely. Clear. Here's the thing most people don't understand, kid. When someone crosses a line and you hold it firmly, you're not breaking the relationship. You're revealing its foundation. And sometimes, that foundation either strengthens or cracks wide open. Trevor didn't like being told what to do. Especially not by a court. Anger management classes were Tuesday nights at a community center 15 minutes from his house. Folding chairs. Weak coffee. A counselor half his size asking grown men why they couldn't control their tempers. For the first 2 sessions, he treated it like a joke. Melissa told me later. He said it was full of idiots, she admitted during one of our short phone calls. Said he doesn't belong there. That's the thing about men like Trevor. They think anger is strength. They don't realize it's exposure. By week 3, something shifted. The counselor, a quiet veteran with calm eyes, had each man describe the moment right before they lost control. Not the explosion. The moment before. Trevor said nothing at first. Then he said, he was undermining me in my own house. The counselor asked, how? He reminded me he helped pay for it. Did he threaten you? No. Did he insult you? No. Then what exactly did he do? Trevor didn't answer. Because the truth was simple. I challenged his authority by existing. And that's when the counselor said something that stuck. If someone's presence makes you feel small, pushing them won't make you bigger. Melissa told me Trevor came home quiet that night. Didn't yell. Didn't blame. Just sat in the dark living room for a long time. Humiliation does that. But humiliation isn't the same as growth. Growth requires ownership. About a month after the court date, he asked to meet me. Public place. Coffee shop. Neutral ground. I almost didn't go. But I did. He was already sitting there when I arrived. No suit this time. No performance. Just tired eyes and a man who hadn't slept well in weeks. I'm not here to fight, he said immediately. Good, I replied. I'm too old for it. That almost made him smile. Almost. He stared at his coffee for a long time before speaking again. They asked me something last week, he said quietly. In class. I waited. They asked if I'd treat a stranger the way I treated you. He finally looked up at me. I wouldn't. No, I said gently. You wouldn't. Silence. I felt threatened, he admitted. Like you still had control. Like I wasn't the man of my own house. And were you? I asked. He didn't answer. Because leadership isn't volume. It isn't force. It's stability. And that day, he hadn't been stable. I'm not asking you to drop anything, he said. I just needed to say I was wrong. That's a hard sentence for some men. It costs more than money. It costs ego. I studied him carefully. He wasn't defensive. Wasn't performing. He was uncomfortable. That's usually real. You don't get my trust back with words, I told him calmly. I know. You get it back with consistency. He nodded. And if I ever see you put your hands on anyone like that again, I added quietly, I won't be this patient. He didn't argue. Didn't puff up. Just nodded again. When we stood to leave, he hesitated. I don't want Melissa choosing between us. She won't have to, I said. If you do better. That's the key, kid. Revenge would have been easy. Press harder. Push for jail. Cut them off. But correction. Correction requires space for someone to either rise or reveal who they really are. As I walked to my truck, I realized something. The fall down the stairs wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering how easily they believed I wouldn't stand up. And the most powerful thing I did was stand. 6 months after the fall, I hadn't stepped inside their house once. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Trevor completed his anger management classes. On paper, he did everything required. Paid the fines. Reported to probation. Kept his job, barely. They moved him to a different department. Less client-facing. Reputation trimmed. That kind of thing humbles a man. Or hardens him. You don't know which until time passes. Melissa started visiting me instead. Short visits at first. Awkward. Careful. Like walking across ice she didn't trust. We didn't talk about that day much. We talked about groceries. Weather. Her garden. But something subtle had changed. She listened more. One afternoon, she arrived without makeup, hair tied back, tired but calm. Trevor didn't yell today, she said suddenly. I looked up from my newspaper. About? Anything. That was new. She sat across from me. He's different, she admitted. Quieter. I didn't react. Because quiet isn't proof. Consistency is. A few weeks later, I saw it myself. I ran into them at the hardware store. Trevor spotted me first. There was a moment, just a flicker, where old pride could have surfaced. It didn't. He walked over. Afternoon, he said evenly. Not forced. Not warm. Just steady. Melissa stood beside him, watching closely. I nodded. We stood there in the paint aisle like three people who had survived something unpleasant. Trevor shifted slightly. We repainted the stairwell, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Why? He held my gaze. Didn't like looking at it. That was the closest thing to remorse he'd offered in months. Not dramatic. But honest. Later that evening, Melissa called me. He wanted to say more, she said. He just doesn't know how. I understood that. Some men aren't raised to apologize properly. They're raised to endure consequences quietly. And that can be enough, if it's real. 2 months after that, I received an invitation. Dinner. Their house. First time since the fall. I won't lie to you, kid, I almost didn't go. Pride whispered no. But growth requires courage on both sides. When I arrived, the attic stairs were replaced. Solid staircase now. Reinforced. That wasn't cheap. Trevor met me at the door. No grand speech. Just, I'm glad you came. At dinner, something else was different. He didn't interrupt Melissa. Didn't dominate conversation. Didn't correct her mid-sentence. Small things. But patterns live in small things. At one point, Melissa dropped a glass. It shattered. 6 months earlier, that might have triggered something sharp. Instead, Trevor stood up calmly. Accidents happen, he said quietly. And he meant it. I watched him carefully. People can fake calm for an hour. They can't fake instinct. Later, while Melissa cleared plates, Trevor and I stood alone in the kitchen. This doesn't erase what I did, he said without looking at me. No, I agreed. I think about it every time I walk past those stairs. Good. He nodded once. I don't ever want to be that guy again. That sentence. That was the one that mattered. Not because he said it. Because his tone held weight. 6 months is enough time for a man to decide whether he was sorry for consequences. Or sorry for behavior. I believed him. Not fully. Not blindly. But enough. When I left that night, Melissa hugged me longer than usual. Thank you for not giving up on us, she whispered. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I hadn't stayed for them. I'd stayed for myself. To prove I wouldn't shrink. To prove respect isn't optional. As I drove home, I realized something simple. The phone call that day didn't just bring police. It brought accountability. And accountability, when it lands properly, can either destroy a man or reshape him. Trevor chose reshaping. And I chose boundaries. Now, I won't pretend everything became perfect. Trust rebuilds slow. Like bone after a fracture. But it can rebuild stronger. Here's what I learned, kid. Mercy doesn't mean weakness. And justice doesn't require cruelty. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is watching someone grow into the person they should have been all along. And if they don't, you walk away steady. But if they do, you let them earn their place back at the table. Just never forget where the line is. Because once you know it, you never let anyone push you past it again. A full year passed. No more shouting. No more threats. Trevor finished probation early for compliance. Stayed in counseling voluntarily. That surprised me. Melissa started coming by every Sunday morning for coffee. Sometimes Trevor came too. Sometimes he didn't. And I watched. Not suspicious. Just observant. One evening, almost exactly a year after the fall, my phone rang. It was Trevor. Not Melissa. Trevor. His voice was different this time. Shaken. Can you come over? I paused. What happened? It's Melissa, he said quietly. She slipped on the back steps. I think her ankle's broken. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat and drove. When I walked in, Melissa was sitting on the couch, pale, trying not to cry. Her ankle was already swelling. Trevor was kneeling beside her. Gentle. Careful. Holding her hand like it was something fragile. He looked up when I entered. Relief washed across his face. I didn't yell, he said quickly. Almost defensively. I didn't panic. I could see that. His movements were controlled. Focused. He'd already called for an ambulance. Already wrapped her ankle. Already moved the rug that caused it. 6 months earlier, maybe he would have exploded at the inconvenience. Blamed her. Blamed the stairs. Blamed anything. Now? He was steady. I stood there watching the man who once pushed me down attic steps hold my daughter like she was the most important thing in the room. And something quiet settled in me. Growth isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in moments like that. When the paramedics arrived, Trevor stayed calm. Answered questions clearly. Didn't pace. Didn't snap. When they loaded Melissa onto the stretcher, she reached for his hand. Not afraid. Not bracing. Trusting. That told me everything I needed to know. Later that night, after the hospital confirmed it was a bad sprain, not a break, Trevor and I stood alone in their kitchen. The same kitchen floor where I'd once lain staring at attic stairs. He looked at me carefully. I think about that day every week, he admitted. Good, I said. He nodded. I was wrong. Not rushed. Not defensive. Just simple. I know, I replied. Silence hung there a moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. When you called someone that day, I thought you were trying to ruin me. I tilted my head slightly. What do you think now? He swallowed. I think you saved me from becoming worse. That's not something a man says lightly. I studied him one last time. He wasn't trying to win me over. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was acknowledging reality. And that's when I realized something, kid. The phone call wasn't about revenge. It was about interruption. Sometimes a man is headed in the wrong direction so steadily. He doesn't even feel the slope. Until someone stops him hard. That fall hurt. The humiliation hurt him. But without it, he might have kept sliding. When I left their house that night, I walked slower than usual. Not from pain. From reflection. Life doesn't always hand you poetic justice. Sometimes it hands you a choice. Break the relationship forever. Or force it to rebuild correctly. Trevor rebuilt. Melissa learned. And I stopped shrinking. That's the real ending. Not sirens. Not courtrooms. Not begging. Just a man who learned restraint. And another man who learned to demand respect. Now listen close, kid. Here's what I want you to carry from this. If someone pushes you down, literally or otherwise, you don't need to destroy them to win. You just need to stand back up. Call the right number. Hold your ground. And let consequences do what shouting never can. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't watching someone fall. It's watching them change. And knowing you were strong enough to make them face it. About a year and a half after the fall, I got a call from Daniel. Not urgent. Just thoughtful. You free for lunch? He asked. We met at the same diner we'd been going to since we were young enough to think 40 was old. Halfway through our coffee, he slid a folded paper across the table. What's this? I asked. Public record, he said calmly. I opened it. Trevor had been promoted. Not back to his old position. Higher. Different department. Leadership track. I looked up at Daniel. He earned it, he said. How do you know? Daniel shrugged. Background review came across my desk for advisory. Clean compliance. Voluntary continued counseling. Community mentorship. Even requested to lead a workplace seminar on conflict management. I leaned back slowly. The irony sat heavy. The man who once lost control at the base of attic stairs. Teaching others about restraint. Daniel studied me carefully. You mad? He asked. I shook my head. No. And I meant it. That evening, I went over to their house unannounced. Old habits. But this time, when Trevor opened the door, he didn't tense. He smiled, cautious, but real. Hey, he said. Come in. Melissa was in the kitchen, humming while stirring something on the stove. Normal. Ordinary. That's what healing looks like. Not dramatic. Just ordinary again. We sat down after dinner. Trevor cleared his throat. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, he said. I waited. He stood up, walked into the hallway, and came back holding a small wooden box. He set it on the table in front of me. I opened it. Inside was one of the attic stair hinges. Bent. Cleaned. Mounted on a small wooden plaque. There was a brass plate under it. It read, Strength is restraint. I stared at it longer than I expected to. I kept this, he said quietly. As a reminder. Melissa reached over and squeezed his hand. I didn't say anything right away. Because words can cheapen moments if you rush them. Finally, I nodded once. Good, I said. That was enough. You see, kid. That phone call I made that day wasn't magic. It didn't summon justice out of thin air. It summoned accountability. And accountability did what yelling, arguing, and pride never could. It forced a man to face himself. Now let me tell you something most people won't admit. I wasn't innocent in everything. I liked reminding them I helped with the house. I liked feeling needed. Maybe I stayed longer than I should have. Maybe I blurred boundaries first. But being imperfect doesn't mean you accept abuse. It just means you learn. And we all learned. Trevor learned restraint. Melissa learned that silence can be betrayal. And I learned that strength at my age isn't physical anymore. It's knowing exactly when to stand up. And when to step back. That hinge sits on my shelf now. Not as a trophy. Not as revenge. As memory. Because here's the quiet truth. The moment he pushed me, he thought he was proving power. The moment I made that call, I proved something else. And the police didn't freeze in shock because I was important. They froze because accountability had arrived faster than anyone expected. Remember this, kid. If someone ever tells you to lie there and think about your behavior, think carefully. Then decide whether that behavior needs correcting or protecting. And if it needs protecting, you stand. You call. And you let the world remind them. Respect isn't optional. Now that's the whole story. And I sleep just fine.